You know the legend of Hannibal. You know the genius of Scipio. You know the elephants crossing the Alps. History books tell you about the glory of the Punic Wars, but they rarely tell you how it ended. Carthage did not fall on a battlefield. It did not end with a treaty. It ended in silence. 17 days of fire. An entire civilization erased. Forget what you know about war. This is the story of a murder. Carthago delenda est. Carthage must be destroyed. It was history's first systematic propaganda. Every day in the Roman Senate, Cato the Elder repeated this curse. Finally, his persistence won. The Senate voted. They didn't just want a war. They wanted a final solution. It had been 53 years since the Battle of Zama. Hannibal was dead. The nightmare was supposed to be over. Carthage was no longer an empire of war. It was a city of merchants, rich, peaceful, and afraid. But Rome needed a legal excuse, so they set a trap disguised as a peace treaty. "Give us your weapons," they said, "and you will be saved." Desperate to survive, Carthage obeyed. They surrendered 200,000 sets of armor, 2,000 catapults. They stripped themselves naked before the wolf. Only when the city was empty of steel did Rome reveal the truth. The Roman consul smiled and gave the final order. "Now, abandon your harbor. Move 10 miles inland." For a merchant city, the sea was life. Moving inland meant starvation. It meant extinction. Rome wasn't asking them to move. Rome was asking them to die. It wasn't a negotiation. It was an execution. The shock lasted only a moment. Then came the rage. The people of Carthage didn't pack their bags. They snapped. The mob turned on the politicians who advised surrender. They hunted down every Italian merchant in the city and tore them to pieces. The message to Rome was clear: we are not leaving. They closed the massive gates, and overnight the merchant city became a factory of war. But they had a problem. They had surrendered all their weapons. They had to start from zero. The entire population was mobilized. Temples were turned into workshops. Rich merchants became blacksmiths. They melted down their golden statues. They stripped the lead and tin from the roofs of their own houses to make shields. The output was terrifying. Historical records tell us the numbers. Every single day they produced 100 shields, 300 swords, 1,000 missiles. But there was one thing they couldn't manufacture: rope. To power their massive catapults, they needed strong, elastic fibers for torsion. They had no hemp. They had no flax. So, the women of Carthage made the ultimate sacrifice. Rich and poor, young and old, they cut off their long hair. They twisted their beauty into strings of death. When the Roman army arrived, expecting an easy surrender, they were met with a storm of arrows powered by the hair of grieving mothers. Rome laughed at them. They said, "How long can a city survive without weapons?" They expected a week. It took 3 years. For 2 years, the mighty Roman legions were humiliated. The shopkeepers of Carthage fought like demons. They burned Roman siege towers. They spread disease in the camp. The hunters became the hunted. Panic spread in Rome. The people demanded a savior. They demanded a Scipio. But Scipio Aemilianus was too young. By law, he could not be consul. The Senate hesitated. But the mob in the streets was furious. So, for the first time, Rome broke its own laws to win a war. They gave him absolute power. Scipio didn't attack the walls. He attacked their lungs. He looked at the harbor, Carthage's lifeline, and made a cold decision. "If we cannot conquer the city," he said, "we will choke it." He ordered his army to dump thousands of tons of heavy boulders into the sea. Day by day, a massive stone barrier, a mole, rose from the water. He was sealing the harbor entrance. But while Scipio was building his wall, the Carthaginians were doing the impossible. Hidden behind high walls, thousands of men, women, and children began to dig. If the front door was closed, They would build a back door. They dug a massive new channel through solid rock and built a brand new navy from the wooden beams of their own houses, in total secrecy. The day Scipio finally finished his barrier, he smiled. He thought he had won, but then he heard a sound from the other side. The Carthaginians smashed through the rock, and, out of nowhere, 50 brand new warships sailed out into the open sea. The Romans stood frozen. The dead city had come back to life. The surprise fleet was a miracle. But miracles don't last. Instead of attacking immediately, the Carthaginians hesitated. That hesitation cost them their existence. Scipio recovered. He crushed the new fleet, and then he tightened the noose. The harbor was sealed. The city was locked, and the hunger began. It wasn't just starvation, it was madness. People ate the leather of their shields. They ate grass. Soon, they began to look at the dead with hungry eyes. But the real horror wasn't the Romans outside, it was the leader inside, Hasdrubal. He grew paranoid. He feared his starving people would surrender. So he did something unspeakable. He dragged Roman prisoners to the top of the city walls, in full view of Scipio's army and his own people. He tortured them. He cut off their fingers. He flayed them alive. He wanted to send a message to his citizens. There is no going back. Rome will never forgive us now. He was right. Rome had no mercy left. One night, under the cover of darkness, Scipio launched a surprise attack on the harbor wall. The starving guards were too weak to fight. The wall was breached. The Romans poured into the streets. The siege was over. The slaughter was just beginning. The walls were breached. But Carthage did not surrender. Instead, the city turned into a meat grinder. What followed was 6 days and 6 nights of hell. History had never seen urban warfare like this. The streets leading to the citadel were narrow and tall. 6-story apartment blocks turned into fortresses. The Romans didn't just fight on the ground, they fought in the sky. Soldiers leaped from rooftop to rooftop. They threw planks across the narrow alleys to bridge the gaps. They butchered each other in kitchens and bedrooms on the tiles of the roofs. The progress was too slow for Scipio. His soldiers were exhausted. They were fighting for every inch. So, Scipio gave an order that froze the blood of his own men. Burn it all. Topple the buildings into the streets to make a road. It was a massacre of gravity and fire. Massive walls crashed down, and underneath the rubble were the people of Carthage. Old men, women, and children hiding in their homes were buried alive or crushed into the pavement. The Roman army didn't walk on stones anymore. They marched over a road made of debris and human flesh. For 6 days, the screams didn't stop, until finally, they reached the citadel. The last 50,000 survivors were huddled in the Temple of Eshmun, waiting for the end. The screaming finally stopped. 50,000 survivors crawled out of the citadel, starving, broken. They surrendered to a life of slavery. Leading them was Hasdrubal, the same general who had tortured Roman prisoners on the walls to prove his bravery. Now, faced with death, his courage vanished. He fell to his knees before Scipio. He kissed the Roman's feet. He begged for his life. Scipio looked at him with disgust, but he let him live. He wanted to parade him in Rome like a trophy, but high above, amidst the flames of the Temple of Eshmun, someone was watching. Hasdrubal's wife. She stood on the burning roof, dressed in her finest royal robes, holding her 2 young sons by the hand. She didn't look at Scipio with fear. She looked at her husband with hatred. Her voice cut through the noise of the fire. She shouted down to the Roman general, "I wish you well, Scipio. You are only following the laws of war." Then she turned her gaze to the man kneeling in the dirt. "But you, Hasdrubal, you coward, you betrayed your city, you betrayed your gods, and you betrayed us. May the ghosts of Carthage haunt you forever." With a final scream, she stabbed her own children and threw their bodies into the inferno. Then, looking straight into her husband's eyes, she jumped into the flames. She chose fire over Rome. The fire did not burn for a day. It burned for 17 days. In the spring of 146 BC, the greatest city of the Mediterranean vanished into smoke. As the flames consumed the last palaces of Carthage, something strange happened. Scipio Aemilianus, the conqueror, did not cheer. He wept. He stood next to his teacher, the historian Polybius, tears streaming down his face. He grasped Polybius's hand and whispered a terrifying truth. "This is a glorious moment, Polybius, and yet I have a dread. I fear that someday someone will give this same order for my own city. For Rome." He quoted the lines of Homer, "The day shall come when sacred Troy shall fall, and Priam, and the people of Priam." He knew that no empire lasts forever, not even Rome, but for Carthage, eternity had ended. The Senate ordered that not one stone be left standing. The ruins were leveled. The people were sold into slavery. And then came the final curse. Legend says the Romans plowed the earth and sowed it with salt, to ensure that nothing, no grass, no crop, no life, would ever grow there again. Hannibal's dream was dead. Cato got his wish. Carthago est deleta. Carthage is destroyed. We have reached the end of another journey through the dusty pages of history, but the whispers of the past never cease. Subscribe to stay with us on this mysterious voyage.